Hey, Dr. Bart.
Hello, Whit.
Good to see you, my friend.
Good to be seen. Nice to see you too.
Thank you. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you. I feel like it's been a minute. It has been a minute.
It feels like it's been a little minute. We've had some cool stuff going on.
Yeah, no doubt. Of course, I just had a trip. I just went down to Tampa for a little bit. So that
Yeah,
was
I
a
was hoping that you might tell us a little bit about that once we get going here.
yeah, so great topic tonight, osteoporosis. And I think this is a very needed conversation for everybody. And I'll give some real insights because with osteoporosis, um, the interesting thing about osteoporosis is that it's probably not what everyone thinks in terms of the way that we're supposed to go about fixing and up healing. I'll tell you right now, it's not about milk and calcium. There's many different ways or different paths that we got to approach that, but we'll dive into that in just a moment here. But it's been 2 weeks since we've been here. We missed a week last week, and I was down in Tampa speaking. That was cool.
Yes. So you were talking to who, Bart? Like, what was this audience you were chatting with?
So this is the beginning part. So this was really city number one of a tour that I'm going to make over the next year. And this was
Crazy.
it was really great. It was all doctors, and the doctors, a lot of chiropractors, some naturopath, acupuncturists, maybe, a medical doctor or two, everyone that's really studying functional nutrition and functional medicine. So it's a great audience, especially this is the first time I taught down in Tampa. And it was nice. My wife Kelly went with me. A couple of dogs came with me, so it was a nice event. I don't know if you can hear it. I caught a little bit of a cold. Not a huge fan of staying in hotels. It's just a little wonky, in hotels, but nonetheless, I feel good right now. I'm just a little clogged up, anyways, and so it's been good. And this is going to be. I'm headed out in a couple of days. I'm heading off to Tennessee, so we're going to do it all again. And the topic, which is one of my favorite topics, and I think it's one of the most important topics right now in healthcare, and it's gut health and adrenal health. So yeah, so it's 8 hours we speak, and so it's just fun. It's a deep dive. I committed to a year and kind of a multi-city tour, if you want to call it, and we'll see after that if I'll be doing this again.
Fair enough. I have to think that gut health, because we're so lucky to talk about it so often here on the show. Do you find that the men and women in the room are like pretty excited to like learn about this to be in service to all the folks that they're in touch with?
You know what? That the answer is yes. Here's what's interesting. One, I'm super excited and super grateful to be able to teach this. I've worked so hard on putting this program together. And what I mean by that is this. There are so many things. No one walks into a doctor's office and says, "Hey, doc, I have a gut problem." It doesn't happen,
True that.
right? So everyone thinks, "Oh, no, that's not me. I don't have that." Yet there's so many things that really are gut issues. I would say everything, almost everything is going to dial back to even tonight's topic, osteoporosis. More often than not, it starts with a gut issue. And so part of the reason it's been such a long journey to get here is because you dabble at different things. Oh, we got to fix the dysbiosis. We got to make sure there's the good bacteria versus the bacteria. Oh, there's some leaky gut. Oh, there's a digestive issue. But no one's ever mapped it out, for me at least, in a sense of you start here, and this is what each and every individual needs to go through. You start here and you finish here. So I was able to deliver that for the first time on this kind of scale. And the feedback, the response to see those doctors so excited, quite frankly, and I'll be honest with you, they're humans too. They wanted it for themselves. And that was very, very apparent, and they wanted it for their communities. They wanted it for their patient base. So I was super excited to do it. I'm looking forward to Tennessee and then Dallas and Austin and New York or wherever else I'm going to go. So I'm super excited for it. It's been a long time coming for me to put this program together. And I didn't know I'm not going to lie. I was a little nervous in how it was going to be received, because this is kind of a first of its sorts out in the marketplace like this.
Well, we are really excited to have you like close to home base here in Florida, but so cool to have you out in the world, like just sharing the stuff that you're passionate about. It's awesome, Bart.
Yeah, thanks. It's fun. I'm looking forward to Tennessee, other than the hotel thing, but I'll work it out.
Beautiful. Well, should we start tonight with a couple clinical insights, Bart?
Yeah, I do have a couple quick ones, and I thought that they'd be pertinent to share. So anyone that's new to the show, welcome to have you. Nice to have you here at the Health Made Simple show. The goal is just to kind of keep it simple. I know there's a ton of information. This goes even for the longtime listeners. I know that there's a ton of information out there. So oftentimes my goal here is to simplify it the best that I can. That means I have to leave some things out, but to simplify it so you can go take as fast of an action and most pertinent actions that you possibly can take. And we're going to do the same thing tonight with osteoporosis. So if you're new to the show, oftentimes I'll start with a little bit of a clinical insight. These are just insights that I have on in clinic that I think, man, maybe I'll share this with everyone. They might be able to appreciate it or apply it in their own personal life. So first one, 59-year-old female who is committed to making this year her very, very best because she is turning the big 60. And she's been getting after it full tilt with how she moves and how she eats and how she thinks. So, and that's kind of the platform I really like to work with people with. So anyways, her aha moment was this. Now that she's been diving into this, so it's been a solid, it seems a lot longer than that, but it's been 2 months, really big since the beginning of the year. And anyways, she told me the other day when I saw her in the office, she's getting adjustments, she's doing therapy, she's doing yoga, she's walking. Her exercise routine, 59 years old, is legit. And not because she has a lot of talent or she used to do it in her life. This is new to her. So, it's so quite frankly, refreshing to watch, but also motivating.
Totally.
Yeah. And I'm like, wait a minute, you walk how many miles? 5 miles a day walking. That's legit. If you're walking out there 5 miles a day, that's legit. And then she exercises and they do all these
After the walking.
Yeah, that's just part of the routine. That used to be the only thing she did. And we talked a lot about the need to build strength. She wanted to feel like $1 million and wanted to feel strong, walking in her shoes and walking down the street and feel like a vital, strong human being. She had to get strong. And she's taking the full tilt. So anyways, she tells me the other day, and this was an interesting comment. She said, it's very interesting. She said, when I drink alcohol, which is less and less and less, I do all the other things bad as well. I don't take my supplements. I eat the wrong foods and I exercise less. And she says, yeah, if I think about taking my supplements, I eat better, exercise more, and do all the other things good. It was just one of those things where all the decisions that we make, they do matter. And some really lead us down a path that doesn't necessarily serve us. In her scenario, her aha moment is like, every time I drink, it's a domino effect on all the other decisions. And I think that's pretty true for most of us.
I have to say, specifically to the supplement point, like I know exactly what she's talking about. Like if you start the day with supplements, if you like put yourself in the mindset to, I mean, it's like a water intake too, to like enjoy all of that. It's a trickle down effect of like the rest of the things that kind of happen as the day goes on. That is awesome.
Yeah. So just a little shout out to her. That's awesome. And then the second one is a 50 some odd year old female who about 4 months ago heard us do a conversation here about Tunga Ali. And we had a good buddy of ours, Dr. Hogsett, on, who came.
Dr. Dave. He was at your talk, wasn't he?
Yes,
in Tampa.
It was great to have him. One of my mentors in the audience, which is great. Anyways, we did this talk months ago, and then she went and got on, and she started taking the Tunga Ali, which is an herbal supplement along with Tribulus. And for years, I've been running her lab work. And she has she's doubled. So she's increased her testosterone by 100%.
Whoa.
Yeah. Which is really interesting because there's not a lot of data on women. And this is what it is, right? So most of the time they're always just testing men. So when she asked me about it, back in the day, 4 or 5 months ago, she said, "Didn't gonna work." I said, "Yeah, can't hurt, try." And she's doubled her testosterone at 50 something years old, it's just fantastic. So a little shout out.
Like, what would someone feel if they, like a woman in her 50s, doubling their testosterone?
Okay, so here's the fascinating. There's a reason behind this. So her libido was shot.
Okay.
And her libido is no longer shot.
Awesome.
Yeah. So so that was the
marker.
Yeah. So fantastic, right? So
props to her.
Yeah, more props to her. So it's it just kind of again leads to the conversation again. As long as we're taking action, we get to have experiences, and then you get to use those experiences to determine your next action. So, power to the peeps that I'm speaking of tonight. All right, so that's all for clinical insights right now.
Those are two really good ones. I love to learn about powerful women, Bart. I love it. So we are stepping into our topic for this evening, my friends. We're going to learn a little bit about bone health
Yeah.
from a functional medicine perspective.
Yeah. Functional medicine and a functional nutrition perspective. So we'll
Awesome.
we'll blend those two together there. So let's just talk about osteoporosis and osteopenia to start with. So if you're not familiar with what do they really mean, well, let's just dive into this. So osteoporosis, it's this kind of ongoing, kind of behind the scenes progressive bone disease. And the reason I say it's behind the scenes because you don't have any symptoms. Like there's no owies, there's no pain. There's really there's some testing we can do, but there's this ongoing thing that can go. And what happens with osteoporosis? So osteoporosis is when they do this thing called a DEXA scan, and they can see that you have a loss of bone. Osteopenia happens right before osteoporosis, and they can recognize that you've had a fair amount of loss of bone, but you're not in a risk factor of having fractures yet. So if you get diagnosed with osteoporosis, they're basically saying you've lost enough bone mass now that you have a risk factor of fractures easily. So that's kind of the deciphering, and I'll run some of the numbers later and talk about there's something called the DEXA scan that you can do. So that in general is what takes place. And the bummer here is that there's no outward symptoms. So you might say the only way to do this is to get tested. And this one I'm going to say for them. So I don't send my peeps to get tested. We'll talk about what it requires to have strong bones. And if you're doing that, awesome. If you're not, assume you're going to get weak bones. Okay. We're going to talk about the nutrients we need in our bodies, the things that are pulling the minerals out. And calcium is definitely one of the most abundant minerals, but calcium does not fix osteoporosis. This is important for us to understand. There's many mechanisms here. So we're going to talk about what actions do we need to take? Are there supplements? And there are some very specific types of ones. What foods do we need to be, consuming? And also, we got to keep our eyes out for what is causing this. And that's, I think, where we should start. What are the risk factors? What's causing people to lose bone mass? And I think before we even dive too deep into that, let's just think about bone. What is it? About 15-20% of it is protein. And the rest of it, think of it as there's water, there's blood, and then a whole bunch of different minerals. And it is those minerals that we lose, and that is what's causing the osteoporosis and the osteopenia.
Okay, interesting. So we all have the great fortune of like getting older, but it sounds like it doesn't necessarily have to involve a lot of bone mass loss.
No, but there is something that naturally takes place in the body. So there's this naturally occurring two events. There's something called, I'll get technical for just a moment here. There's something called osteoclasts, C-L-A-S-T-S, and osteoblasts. Osteoclast means the breakdown and the removal of bone. And then there's osteoblast, the rebuilding and remodeling of bone. And this, Whitney, is happening, let's just call it a one-to-one relationship most of our lives. And as long as it's happening one-to-one, awesome. The moment there's more osteoclastic activity, breaking down and removing of bone, we get in trouble. That's when we literally start to see lesser bone formation. And that's what we're looking at. So then now the bummer is here. It does happen it certainly seems like it happens with age, but I'll kind of argue that it might not be age as much as it might be as much as what are we doing while we age? And here's the reason being is because we know, because we can test over and over again that we can take a 70-year-old woman, put her in vinyasa yoga where she's physically moving her body, doing push-ups, and she can improve her bone density. And we'll get to that in a little bit. So again, it's common with age, but I do not believe age is a sickness. I don't believe it's a disease. Some people may argue that. I don't believe it's necessarily a disease. I think how we age is a bigger question here, is the bigger challenge.
This is kind of inspiring already because I suppose I might think of osteoporosis like I've lost some bone mass and then that's me forever. But of course, we have broken bones that mend, so our body has the capacity to like build bone.
Yeah, it certainly does. So now you just got to ask yourself, do I have the tools, and do I have the intelligence to apply those tools within my body? And is it all working together? So are the tools there and the nutrients, and is there anyone interfering with that? So are there any bad guys coming in that are keeping me from building bone? Because you're 100% right. People break bones all the time. So one of I guess the side effects is because there's not a lot of symptoms that are associated with, with osteoporosis, not outwardly symptoms, but it would be easy to break a bone. So for example, one, and it's kind of a scary statistic, is that as people get older, and there's definitely more prevalence here with women than there is men. And there's a couple of reasons for that. We'll go into that. Yet if people fall and they have osteoporosis, the number one common thing is to have a hip fracture. And here's what's scary. 50% of the people with osteoporosis within a 1 year time will die if they have a hip fracture over the age of 50. So I said a lot of words there, but nonetheless, you break your hip, you're 50 years old plus, and you have osteoporosis, because of all the issues that are going to take place after that, there's a 50% of chance of death. That's equivalent to being diagnosed with cancer, the odds on living a year later. So it's a legit thing for us to pay attention to. And I say that because in my belief, and I probably feel this way about a lot of things, but it's so fixable. So fixable. It is something we have 100% control over. And do I think that our genes or, is it hereditary? Very, very, very little. In fact, yeah, very, very little, especially with what we see in science right now, what we see with clinical outcomes, that you can make such an impact on your bone density. So it's hard to blame it on genes.
I wonder, Bart, before we kind of step into like our risk factors and stuff, we had a question come in on Zoom from Kathleen. What is the difference between osteoporosis and osteoarthritis?
Good question. So osteoarthritis is a degenerative situation, takes place within the joints predominantly. Osteoarthritis, think of osteo means bone, arth means joint, means you have inflammation, that's itis, of the joint around the bones. Very similar situations here. It is, all the risk factors are about the same, other than we're going to get into the benefit of weight bearing. That's not necessarily the same for osteoarthritis, but osteoarthritis is 100% a nutrient deficiency combined with being blocked. The nutrients are being blocked from getting to the joints, and then the joints wear down. Osteoporosis, you are literally losing the bone. There are some technical things there. So for example, there's a calcium and a phosphorus imbalance that takes place, especially in osteoarthritis, and that's the nutritional component. And when it comes to just osteoarthritis, it isn't necessarily a calcium deficiency, which is going to surprise people when, like, that already surprised people when I say that. It's not necessarily a calcium deficiency. And yes, 99% of our calcium is found in our bones, but it's not a calcium deficiency. It's the other things that are taking place around what's going on with the calcium.
It's so interesting you say that, Bart, because I know that many of us feel like we've been told it's how much milk we drank as a kid is like the only determinant of like how strong our bones are, but so many things contribute.
Yeah, so the whole milk thing gets really, really, really interesting. So remember the commercials? I think everyone,
Yes, that's literally what I'm thinking of.
yeah, that said got milk, right? Here's what's wild about that. They had to pull those commercials. The FDA found them misleading meaning that there was no evidence that milk helped improve bone strength. This gets worse. In fact,
that's pretty bad already. Keep going.
Okay, so they literally had to pull the commercials. So it wasn't kind of, sort of. You won't find the commercials anymore because they've been all yanked down. Gets worse. In the event, I think it's 200 milligrams or about a glass of milk today will, listen close, 200 milligrams, about a glass of milk a day, could increase your possibility of a fracture by 9%. Increase, not decrease.
But by what percent?
By 9%. So think of
9%. Yeah.
So this thing that we thought was always supporting bone structure and bone health isn't necessarily the truth. Now, I think that there's some challenges that happen along the way. I think that there was a time in a day when there were some properties of raw milk that wasn't processed, that wasn't literally just manipulated over and over and over again, that probably could give us good things. So for example, I could argue that raw milk has some good fats and maybe some good proteins and some good probiotics in it, but not the stuff we buy on the shelf. No way. The way that they've commercialized the milk process right now, the best word I have for it is it's disgusting. It's sad. So they literally milk pregnant cows right now for efficiency. The cow is pregnant and they have the machines milking it. There's over 40 different hormones. There's all kinds of stuff going on through this cow. So the milk that we are getting as humans and young kids are drinking right now, no doubt milk is designed to make things grow. So now there's all kinds of research going out there. Is there a link between, so it's a growth hormone is really what milk is. And you see now with young women having, young girls having, very, very large, abnormally large breasts. You see the possibilities, and I think we're going to see more and more studies coming out and link between milk consumption and cancer, and because it's a growth hormone. And it's not a product that it once was. I'm still not a huge advocate. A lot of people say, what about raw milk? I think I don't drink it. I think it could be super good for us. I still think that milk is pretty much made for growing babies. For the most part, I think that's a pretty common thing around the world, that baby calves drink milk, baby monkeys drink milk, baby humans drink milk, but adults don't. And I know there's a lot of advocates of raw milk, and I think that, all right, that's great. It's probably fantastic for us, but I'm not one of those that says, yeah, I think you need to have this in your diet regularly.
So we're going to explore some other options tonight to support our bones outside of cow's milk.
Yeah, that was our little tangent on cow's milk. We'll just leave it at that. But it's so important because to this day, I still hear the moms and they think they're doing the right thing. They really think, well, I'm getting him to drink a lot of milk so he gets good, healthy, strong bones. I had a mom in the other day saying, well, my son is weightlifting, should he eat more? I definitely got him drinking a lot more milk now. And I'm looking at the kid, he's inflamed as can be, red, puffy cheeks. It goes hand in hand. How do I know? I grew up, that was me. I thought the milk made muscles. I drank as much possible milk as I could. I was still a scrawny little kid, just puffed up with a beat up gut, right? And a bunch of acne all over me. So, all right, let's talk about some of these risk factors. So number one, inactive lifestyle. And then the list gets a little bit deep here. So alcohol, no doubt about it. So anything that inhibits mineral absorption is huge here. So alcohol, low testosterone, and we're going to have to cover this one in just a moment, but low estrogen, especially in postmenopausal women. Inactivity. So when we put the inactivity with postmenopausal women and then high sugar, possibly soda, that's a shitstorm. And that's, unfortunately, that's taking place a lot right there. Those subtleties right there. So low vitamin D. The thing about vitamin D, I can almost argue that vitamin D levels are more important than monitoring or taking in calcium, because your vitamin D is going to regulate your calcium levels. It's going to be the one to push it here and push it there. So it's real important that we understand, especially clinically, the vitamin D levels that someone has. And again, the beauty is that if someone wanted to test, you could do a solo test. You can finger prick your test. It's probably $70 or $80. Send that in, and you could know your levels of vitamin D, which could be very important. Smoking, steroids, corticosteroids, prednisones, these are all going to inhibit your ability to absorb your minerals. The big ones I want to talk about tonight is gut health. Go imagine that.
Surprise, right? Surprise.
Yeah. So when you think about it, this rarely is a situation where we have not enough calcium coming into the body. People that have a deficiency in calcium, there are signs and symptoms. And the first sign and symptom is that they get colds and infections often. So if you're listening right now and you're wondering, I don't know if I have a calcium deficiency, I wonder. Lab work isn't super good for it, quite frankly, because you're taking in and losing so much of it on a regular basis. Yet if you get infections frequently and you get colds frequently, there's a good sign that you have a calcium deficiency or a calcium inability to absorb, an absorption issue for your calcium. So that's just one kind of thought process there. So our gut health is absolutely critical, important here. So let's just talk about leaky gut for just a moment here. Remember, we are supposed to get our minerals. We're supposed to break them down, or we're supposed to eat them. That's a good starting point. We have to eat them to get them into the body. And then the team that's supposed to shovel them off is our digestive system. So hopefully we can break them down. And then if we can break them down, hopefully they end up in the right spaces, in the right places. If we have leaky gut, then what's going to happen is that we literally have these minerals, we have these vitamins, we have the nutrients, we have bacteria, parasites, we have all the junk from the inside of the intestines leaking out into the body. And the problem here with isn't necessarily even a nutrient issue now. Now we have systemic inflammation. There is a new term, which I think it's gaining ground. It's called inflammaging. Inflammaging. Yeah, it's like inflammation and aging together.
I hadn't heard that before. Okay. Inflammaging.
So, inflammaging. And this is kind of this just almost assumed nonstop systemic inflammatory state that people as they age, they just have, because there's so much leaky gut taking place. There's so much junk in our bodies. Our livers are slowing down a little bit. Our diets aren't so great. We're smoking a little bit more, maybe have more alcohol or soda. It still blows my mind that people drinking sodas, but a lot of people are. So there's all these things coming into our body, and we have this systemic inflammation. So even if at this point we're eating, so you have kale, and kale is a phenomenal source of calcium. Eggs, phenomenal source. So the point being, there's calcium everywhere. In the event that we are eating it, we can still have a massive deficiency of getting it into the right area. So we can have a mineral absorption issue because of our other lifestyle choices and because of what's going on in our body. So when you have leaky gut, unfortunately, we're going to have a situation where we have inflammation systemically. So to the person who asked earlier, what is osteoarthritis? This is an inflammatory issue. There's so much inflammation in the body, the joints can't get the nutrients. So if you say you're using your wrist over and over and over again, and it needs more nutrients, it needs more calcium, it needs more minerals to replenish the actual joint because you're using it so much, and it can't get them because everything's inflamed, then we have the disease process sets in. So we're really looking at more than even just consumption at this point. We're looking at this big, kind of elephant in the room, which is inflammation. Inflammaging.
Inflammaging, yes.
So I'll back up a little bit and get a little specific. So no surprise to any of our listeners that I'm not a huge fan of gluten, right?
I might have heard that before from you, Bart. Maybe once or twice.
When I speak of it, I don't just say, just because it's a, zero nutrient food, if you want to even call it food, or it's, been manipulated so many times, or it has GMOs, or, whatever. Here's one of the challenges with gluten. So gluten has what's called phytates in it, and phytates are anti-nutrients. This is important to understand for everyone out there. If you've got osteoporosis, ever been diagnosed with osteoporosis, and we'll talk about how you test it in just a moment, and your doctor's not talking to you about your diet, about taking in alcohol, about taking in sugar, about smoking, about soda, about gluten, and they're misleading you. And I don't say that lightly, because I really think that this is simple to fix. And if it gets downstream, so I had this conversation in the office today, because it comes up more often than not. I had this conversation in the office, and the lady that I was talking to said, "So there's no symptoms?" I said, "Yeah, and the good news is it's very easy to make sure that you probably wouldn't fall into this category." It's like, well, what if you did get really far down the road, you started breaking bones? Like, you can get spinal compressions where literally you get your vertebrae compress. And that's when you start to see people really, really hunched over, Whitney. This is, those people have osteoporosis in their spine, and their bones are crushing on the front side. So if it's supposed to be square, the front side pancakes, and it squishes down and it pushes them forward. Once you get to that spot, there's no fixing that. So hopefully everyone's listening. And we go, all right, I'm going to make sure that I never get to that spot where my bones are so soft and so brittle that they start breaking because I sneezed. Like some of the most common spaces and places that people do this, sneezing and coughing, and it'll break
Sneezing
a
and
rib.
coughing.
Yeah. So
And I know we're like covering a good bit here about the gut health component of it, but I wanted to ask about when you talked about like an inactive lifestyle being a risk factor for osteoporosis. Does that come from both like just the action of moving your body, so you're getting like stress, like stress on the bones, or is it just from the internal aspect of like what's like going in is like helping to support the bones themselves?
good question. And the answer to that is the actual stress on the bones is the key here. So there's this thing that we learned way back in schools called Wolff's Law. And what that means, Wolff's Law was, I guess it was a Dr. Wolff. He came up with he figured it out in science that bone remodels to stress. So every time we put our foot on the ground and put all our body weight into that one leg, that's when we get the osteoblastic activity. The body goes, hey, we need to build some bone. We need to build some bone because you keep walking. So the more you walk, the more osteoblastic activity we need. But it needs to be responding to something, especially as we age. So let's just say that we got the scale got tipped a little bit out of our favor for whatever reasons. We sat at a desk for 20 years for a job or something, or you just became inactive, whatever it may be, or you just slowed down and maybe you had some injuries. And now you have this imbalance. You have more osteoclastic, which is bone removing activity versus bone building up. The beauty is the moment you get on your feet and you start putting weight bearing efforts into your body, you flexing your bones, you start building up that osteoblastic activity. Now, if we really want to get good at this, we put some weights into our hands. We put some weights on our shoulders and we compress the body, or we make things heavy in our body so the whole body has a little bit of stress on it. And we put all the bones under osteoblastic activity. We put all the bones under stress to create this osteoblastic activity. So really simple activities, things like it's called a farmer's carry, which you do it if you own a farm. What that really means, you pick something up heavy and you walk with it. And it's really hard, and because it's heavy and you have to walk long distances. And it's phenomenal for your bones because you have to you're putting all your body under stress. In the gym, I think I mentioned this a couple of shows ago, my wife and I, this is one of the reasons we did it, so we can increase our bone density. So my wife, who's in her 50s, she's going to be entering menopause shortly, and which means her estrogen levels are going to drop. Once the estrogen levels drop, you increase something called follicle stimulating hormone, FSH, and you increase osteoclastic activity. Ladies, listen to me really closely on this. When your estrogen drops, you increase osteoclastic activity 5-to-1 relative to a male, 5-to-1. So that is why we see so many little old ladies hunched over. Men can still have this issue, but you all got to work. You got to work. You get your posture strong. You got to work on your muscles. And usually this is the group that has the least muscular, activity taking place. Maybe there's a little cardio taking place, but we're talking about putting some pressure on the spine itself, not, and safely, but anything that we can start to add a little stress to the body, especially to the bones, we get them to flex a little bit, and we create this osteoblastic, meaning building up of bone. So up at our farmhouse, we got this piece of equipment called a hex squat little rack thingy. It's almost like think of doing a squat, but you don't have to load it on your spine. I love deadlifts, love squats, but no doubt they're inherently bring some injuries along with them. So there's this thing called a hex squat, and you step into it. It's almost like a circular or an oval, and then you just pick it up and you put it down. You pick it up and you put it down, and you try to put heavy weights on it. So I love watching my wife do it because it's just inspiring because now she's getting stronger. And it's really good. It's good for the shoulders. It's good for the arms. It's good for the hands and legs, the knees, the ankles, the joints, everything. You don't need that to do it. You could literally just pick up something heavy. You could pick up a couple hand weights and go for a walk. But I would also encourage you that those things that you're going to pick up are heavy. They're not 3-pound dumbbells. You can walk, you can go do your cardio with a 3-pound dumbbell, but you're picking up heavy stuff. In an ideal world, this is where it gets really tricky. In an ideal world for optimal fitness, superhuman type stuff, you can carry your body weight for 90 seconds, walking 90 seconds.
So carrying your entire body weight in whatever format or fashion for 90 seconds while you're moving.
Yes.
Can you throw it at the end?
What's that?
Can you like throw it at the end, or do you have to like peacefully set it down? Okay.
So for someone like myself, so to make this relevant, that someone like myself, that would be like picking up 2 90-pound dumbbells or 90-pound, what do they call those little swingy ones? But
Kettlebells.
Kettlebells, yes. That's no joke. Like, yeah, I would say right now, I don't know that I can do it. Yeah,
90 seconds is longer than we may think, but what a cool thing to work towards. And that's the coolest thing about our bodies, because like if we put in some effort, like push-ups are so magical because you start off where you start off, and then all of a sudden you can like do more than you did before. So I get why it's awesome to see Kelly work with like the hex bar, because she's like picking up heavier stuff like every time.
Yes. So let me go back a little bit about risk factors, because there's some others here that I can't skip over because they're important. There are some things that people are taking right now, medications that are leading them to, like, it's a direct route toward osteoporosis. And those are things like antacids, or what we call PPIs. So a lot of the antacids will inhibit your ability to absorb things like vitamin C, absorb things like zinc, most of your minerals when you're on an antacid. So, and this is worth saying because there are a lot of people out there that are consuming antacids like they're candy for heartburn. And again, what's the real issue? What's the root cause of that issue? We got a gut issue. So we got to be really careful. That's one of the things that we got to be really, really mindful. There's some of the SSRIs where we use for anxiety or depressions, same thing. They're inhibitory when it comes to minerals and vitamins. Sugar, for example, just real simple, blocks out vitamin C, and you need C to make collagen. So these are really important things that we want to, things that we talk about over and over and over again that are very winnable if we're paying attention.
To the degree, Bart, I just want to say we had a comment just come in on Facebook from Jean, and she shared that she needed to hear all of this, everything you've shared so far. She is not going to let fear hold her back anymore.
Beautiful. I love it. Yeah, I love it. Yeah, and this one of my, and so I guess let's talk about, there's a test you can do. We'll talk about this briefly. And I don't know that I even recommend everyone going doing it. Yet, if you are that individual out there that needs to see it on paper, to see your scores, awesome, go get her done. Prior to getting on here today, I checked to see if they're locally at Sacred Heart or Ascension Sacred Heart. I think Ascension's like all over the country. You can do a DEXA scan there. And that's what they usually call it, a DEXA. Sometimes it's spelled DEXA or DXA. A DEXA scan typically looks like it's about anywhere from $200 to $300, so reasonable. I'm not even telling you have to do it. It will tell us your bone density, but it doesn't tell bone fragility. And these are important differences. So let's just talk about the scan real quickly. So the way that the tests usually work, if you have your score is a -2.5 or greater, like -2.5, -3, etc., that'd be considered osteoporosis. That's what we're trying to avoid. And even if you have that test, just know this: the single best scientifically proven ways to get this back is what we're talking about here tonight. And I will bring it all together because it is what we put into our body. We got to get our gut health right. We got to eat right. We got to move right. And if you do that, you'll get stronger bones. Then if you score between like a 1 or a -1 to up to a 2.5, that's considered osteopenia. And that's saying you have definitely a loss of bone. So it's under 0, right? So you should have a 0 or above. If you're under there, then it's saying you're osteopenia. You're probably not in the concern of fracture state yet. It's concern enough to saying we've seen that you are losing bone. Now, that being said, the medications, and I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but the medications that they have out there for this, quite frankly, not so great. Not so great. Yeah. this is probably one of the areas in that whole world that they do not have an answer for. And I'll go as far as saying this: one of the side effects of their medication, especially after prolonged use, is fracturing bones. And that should say enough. Like that, if there's, yeah, I know, sounds crazy, right? That
The side effect of the medication is that which it is trying to alleviate.
100%, yes.
Okay.
And there's other areas that again, I don't want to dive too much into it, but it's certainly not like listen, blood pressure medication will lower your blood pressure, regardless of whether we like it or not, or why it's happening. But these medications that they're using will not increase your bone density. What they really do is they slow down the osteoclastic activity, but it doesn't increase osteoblastic activity. So that is why there's such a wish-wash, and I don't even really know many doctors that are recommending. I'm sure there are some out there. Yeah, keep that in mind. Those medications are only slowing down the removal process. They're not doing anything for the remodeling. So might as well just start on what we're talking tonight and increase the remodeling effect, increase the bone matrix part.
That makes a lot of sense, Bart. Yeah.
All right. So, and then, are there a lot of people out there? Probably 10 million people right now with osteoporosis, and maybe another 40 million with osteopenia. And I would say that number is just going to continue to rise based on the work that I'm doing and seeing with gut health, that probably 80 to 90% of the people have some level of dysbiosis, some level of leaky gut, which means that we're going to have mineral and vitamin and nutrient absorption issues. That's assuming you're eating good. So let's dive in. I think did I cover the whole gluten thing? Did I beat that up enough?
I think we hit the gluten. Did we talk about SSRIs? Just to mention though, that also is like a little risk factor.
Yeah, just knowing that the SSRIs, which you wouldn't really think of, or you were not really thinking of, oh, if I take this antacid, my belly's hurting me. Am I taking this antacid to decrease the amount of acid, heartburn, or reflux that I have right now? Is this going to affect my long-term bone development? And the answer is yes, especially with prolonged use. And it's also one of the reasons a lot of those proton pump inhibitors, that's what a PPI is, and antacids, they're not recommended long-term. Somehow people are using them for years and years and years. Yet that is one of the ways that if you wanted to you're trying to create a strategy to make weak bones, you'd go on an antacid or a PPI long term. That would be like, this is going to work. You wouldn't do that though. No one would do that.
No, nah. So what might we do about this, Bart? What awesome strategies do we have to tackle?
Yeah, let's talk strategy. This is what really matters here tonight. So hopefully that was enough to get your attention, and know that it is not just about consuming more calcium, which we're going to go into right now. And it's not just about drinking more milk. And this is important that we got to look at lifestyle stuff. We got to look at the smoking and the soda and the alcohol and the PPIs and the SSRIs and the inactive lifestyle. And no matter how far off you are, there's an opportunity to change. And that's my favorite part about osteoporosis, that if you flip all this upside down and start doing all the other things, you cut out some of the alcohol, get rid of the gluten. But inevitably, if you're probably listening to this, you're gluten-free anyways. All right, so let's start with what I think is the most important. It doesn't matter which one I think is most important, because they all are, but this is one I think is the most important. I think it's exercise. Our bodies respond on so many levels. Let's just start with what we talked earlier about putting stress on bones. Even if you're going for a jog, you're going to put your bones under some stress, which is beautiful. So that means you're going to be activating your body's osteoblastic activity, which is absolutely fantastic. And we want to do that all day long. Am I going to recommend? My number one favorite thing was absolutely going to be for you to lift weights, lift some heavy weights, do it frequently, get stronger. Absolutely. Because other things are going to go with this. Kind of earlier to that clinical insight, when we make bad decisions, let's say, I'm not going to drink anymore, and you start drinking. Then we make other decisions that go along with that bad decision, right? The flip side of this goes the other way as well. When you start to exercise more, it'll probably lean you into eating better. And so when we start to eat better, we start to feel better about ourselves. This in conjunction with exercising. So for example, when we exercise, we're going to increase hormonal activity. So for guys, listen, I didn't talk too much about the guys here, but guys, you're very vulnerable as well for osteoporosis, and because low testosterone is a huge component to not being able to make good, strong bones. And the majority of men that I test out there, most have low testosterone. So how do we help this? We get strong again. We get into the gym and we find things that we enjoy doing, maybe a group exercise class, maybe a vinyasa yoga class, something that's gonna push you a little bit. And maybe you're not awesome at it, but you can get, well, I don't know, maybe you'll never be awesome at it, whatever awesome is at exercise, but you'll end up having fun because you'll feel the effects, the hormonal effects. So exercise to me is the perfect place to start. And again, we have to put our bodies under some duress. So if you want to know, like what I don't, as of today, I don't have a squat rack, but I'm Googling another squat rack. So I might be buying one soon. So I'm not like, again, squat racks and deadlifts and stuff like that. In fact, I think I'm seeing more and more why it's so important that we do put our body under a little bit more duress, especially as we age, because we do this a lot cumulatively, right? So even if at this point in my life, I don't sit a lot per day, when I think about how much I've sat in my life, and there's no gravity bearing on my femurs right now because they're like this instead of, holding my body up. It's not good. That's not what we want. My spine's all scrunchy and it's kind of, folding forward. So anything we can do to increase that osteoblastic activity, I think is brilliant. All right. I think the second one, because it's so easy, vitamin D levels. Vitamin D is going to be partially of how our body regulates calcium. So we need that calcium coming in and out of the bones. We can't get too much in the arteries. And, but we do need some floating around the body as well as a protective agent. So if you haven't, checked your vitamin D levels lately, and everybody's different. And so I don't even want to say to take a certain amount of vitamin D because we all need different levels, especially once the summer comes. Some of us are going to be perfectly fine with just getting a little bit of sun every day. Literally, you make vitamin D in your body. You got to be exposed to the sun to do it. So it's a hormone that your body makes. And some of you won't need to supplement at all. Some of you just don't do a really good job because your gut might be beat up too much or whatever it may be. And therefore, you got to do a fair amount of supplementation. So the best way we know there is you test and then you sample and you kind of figure out what works out there. All right, let's talk diet for a moment. Here's the good news. You can get good sources of calcium just about anywhere. And I'm going to throw out some, I'm going to throw out what I will consider probably, it could be the best food. If you have osteoporosis and you're saying, all right, I need a couple of things. I didn't talk about these yet, but some of the supplements that you're going to eventually want, I'll go into these in just a moment. You need omega-3s. Those are going to be really, really important. There's going to be a source of or a type of calcium, or it's really going to be really what I call a raw bone meal, a raw cold pressed bone meal. We'll talk about that in just a moment, because if it's not raw and it's heated, it's not going to do you any good. And then we want good proteins. Remember, part of the bone is made of protein. So if you think about how can I get some bone, raw bone, some protein, and omega-3s? That sounds like a sardine to me.
It's very exciting for you, Bart. You do love sardines.
Yes. So if you want something that would probably be like, the best osteoporosis diet out there, eat all those little fish that have the bones in them. I think
Awesome.
there's mackerel, right? There's sardines, and I'm sure there's a couple others. So those would be a solid way if you just wanted to eat. Those would be the ones to eat. Now, things like kale and everything green, quite frankly, has a good source of calcium. Now, we do have to, make sure that our bodies are healthy to absorb that. So let's talk essential fatty acids, or what we call omega-3s. This is critical. So I'm a fan of old school cod liver oil. That's kind of a go-to for me. It has vitamin A and it has vitamin D in it. And then it also has the omega-3s, a little bit of DHA and EPA. So I think that would be fantastic for someone that was looking to properly, support their body that might have been diagnosed with osteoporosis. That's a good one, cod liver oil. So like the idea of sardines, I think that's pretty clever right there. What else? Supplements. So I'll talk about one I use specifically in clinic, not too available. You'll have to get it through a provider like myself or something. It's called Calcifood. So What this is raw spines and raw veal spine and raw ribs that are crushed up, and they're in a raw state and they're cold pressed. And they have these little wafers or a powder, and they're yummy. So this would be a fantastic source if you have a little bit of osteoporosis, you have a little osteopenia, or you're just trying to be preventative. Fantastic. So what this is going to supply you with is think of the raw materials where we kind of started this conversation. So long as you have the materials to make bone, you can make it. So we're going to exercise, and then we're going to put in the materials. The raw materials come from that cold pressed raw bone meal. Make sure if you're out there and you go to the store and you see, oh, it says bone meal. If it's not cold pressed and raw, it's probably cooked and it'll do you nothing. Zip, not a nothing. Calcium, for those of you who have calcium tablets at home, unfortunately. So I rarely give calcium as a result of someone coming in and say, well, I'm getting older. Should I be taking calcium? I was like, sure, maybe for your immune system. But in terms of just calcium, it's easier for you to eat it than you need to supplement it. And then the type that you have is really important. If you have calcium at home, go look at the back of your bottle. If your bottle says calcium carbonate, very difficult. Just bag it. Meaning that if you're trying to get that into the bone matrix, most likely it's not going to happen because it's just a harder calcium to get into your body. That's the equivalent of eating eggshells. There's nothing wrong with they're not bad for you, but you're not going to be absorbing that and really utilizing that as a source of minerals to reestablish a good bone matrix. So calcium food, there is one other, I'll just at least throw that out there. And of course, reach out to your practitioner if you're looking for something to, do a little deeper dive and you need some, help, medical advice or something like that. Call your provider, call me if you want. There's another one I often use with my peeps, and it's called Biost. Whole name means nothing to you. And what it is, it's that raw bone meal that's cold pressed. They process this down. They basically smush it up, and they use that as the protomorphogen. So they combine it with they combine the matrix with the protomorphogen. There's a product called Biost. And this is getting a little technical, but what that does, now we have the intelligence of what do we do with it? And we have it, which are all the nutrients that your body's going to use. So that's how I typically kind of address the case. And same thing I'm talking about here. Start with exercise, make sure we know our vitamin D levels. Let's not do all this effort and not know one of the simple things like vitamin D, because your vitamin D is going to be the one to help transfer it in and out of the bone. So vitamin D levels, lots of greens, lots of minerals. Magnesium is a must. Exercise, hex bark, farmer's carry, vinyasa yoga. I'm trying to think some other push-ups, fantastic. And these are things that we try to get. If you're getting stronger at them, so are your bones. That's what's cool.
So even if I don't know, like let's say I haven't gotten a DEXA, is it DEXA?
Yeah, DEXA scan. Yep.
If I hadn't gotten a DEXA scan and I just look at these risk factors that you've offered, Bart, and I'm like a woman on her way to the 50s, and I've had a bunch of milk when I was a kid, and maybe I haven't been in the sun so much, and some of these other things, if you smoked in the past, could I go ahead and explore some of these options to just get stronger in my the blast activity without necessarily having the confirmation?
I would say yes, because everything we're talking about is super healthy, super natural, super just good for us to do as a human being. And in fact, that would be my encouragement, that you do these things. It develops that internal confidence. So we don't want fake confidence. We don't want to get a test and all of a sudden the test says, oh, you don't have it. So therefore, oh, I'm good. I don't need to do that. That's my bummer. That's my and listen, I do a lot of testing. My challenge is that sometimes it backfires. Sometimes I know the person's lifestyle is absolute junk, and then they come back and their blood work looks good. We're just not into a disease state yet. And they go, oh, I'm good. Look at I can't tell you how many times someone comes into me that I know has fatty liver disease. Remember, fatty liver disease is real easy. Stand up if you're a guy, look down. If your ribs go here and then your stomach sticks out, especially on the right side, your stomach sticks out farther than your ribs, you have some level of fatty liver disease. in the event, I see this all the time, and a guy's coming, oh, I went to my doctor, says my liver enzymes look good. Well, because the liver enzymes only show up on your labs when you're in a diseased state. So to your question, do I think everyone should go out and get a test? Probably not a huge advocate of it. If you're an individual, you know who you are. If you need some data to maybe push you, to maybe scare you, whatever, to motivate you, then get the test. It's real simple. It's not invasive. It is an X-ray. It's a version of an X-ray, but it would be probably less invasive than probably when you're going through the airport. Yeah, so I don't think it's real invasive. Now, normal X-rays for the most part are not diagnostic of osteoporosis and osteopenia. And then last, I would talk about that test. The one thing that the test DEXA can't do, it can't tell us how flexible our bones are, which is also important. So you can have bone density, but if you're not using them, they become brittle. So again, there's really no beneficial situation of not using your body.
And when you say flexible bones, Bart, we're talking about a bone in and of itself having some malleability to it. I know all day long you're touching spines and you're feeling this stuff.
Yeah, so the longer bones especially, when you think of your femurs and your forearm bones, your radius, your ulnar, your humeral bone, there should be some flexibility in them. They should have some bend to them. Even your hip bones, there should be a little bit of flex in them. The spinal vertebrae, some, but much less, it's a tighter, smaller, more dense bone. Yet bones should have flexibility. They're made of collagen. They're made of proteins. They're made of minerals. So, and if you if you ever seen a bone broken open, you're like, oh, it must be really old because it's got a bunch of holes in it. That's real. That's even when there's blood flowing on the inside of our bone. They're not solid. So there's flow, there's a matrix in there that these blood and nutrients and everything is kind of working back and forth, and the body's making all this great stuff and sending it out into the bodies. It's absolutely brilliant and beautiful the way it's taking place. But they also need to, for protectiveness, to protect themselves, they have to have a little flex to them. And the more we are stationary, the less flexible they become.
Fair enough.
Yeah. All right, I think I've covered everything I want to. I think I've covered everything. Can you think of it? You got anything else for me there in terms of what I might have missed when it comes to osteoporosis or osteopenia?
I do have a question from Facebook that came in. Curious if one would use CalciFood and BIOS, or is there? How would you distinguish between the two?
I would do both for the short term. So if you're diagnosed with osteoporosis, I typically have the individual use the BIOS for about 90 days, and then I'll let that one go away. And one of the ways, just to give you a little an idea, if your teeth are starting to get loose, like you can wiggle them, a little eye opener. Yes. That is a little eye opener because that tells us a little bit about how the connective tissue is working for our bones. Our teeth are part of the bone system. And if you're finding yourself getting cavities frequently, again, we're thinking about the minerals and the nutrients that are going to our bones are also going to our teeth. So the BIOS, which is phenomenal, can strengthen up and tighten those teeth, which is phenomenal. And it'll do the same thing. So I usually go to answer that question. I usually use the BIOS for about roughly 12 weeks. And then I pull that one out there, and then I just have them chew on the CalciFood, eat a lot of sardines, get some great exercise, and move the body, increase their hormones naturally, eat some green stuff, eat some protein, like eat a burger, eat a grass-fed burger, get some eggs in your body, do a little bit of all that. Keep the junk out. We're gluten-free. We're alcohol reduced, right? We can't drink alcohol every night and assume good things are going to take place. We're getting off the soda. We're getting off the sugar. We're getting off of the things that are stressing us out. Stress I didn't talk about tonight, but it'll also inhibit mineral absorption. So we start to create this thing that we talk about here often on the Health Made Simple shows, become strong superhumans. That's the name of the game.
So with that in mind, Bart, it brings us to our last question of the show. What is one step our listeners can take towards becoming superhuman?
I think I would say just in the context of tonight, have some fun getting stronger, because there's so many of our health conditions, and I say stronger, and I also mean our mental fortitude. So the willingness and the decision. I think it's harder for people to make a decision to eat good versus to not eat good. I think that fortitude is harder than going to the gym, right? So and I know this to be true. Like, I know it's easier for me to get people to get them exercise than it is to change their diets. So get strong and have fun doing it. Challenge yourself, right? Become that individual I talked about earlier, that's trying to become 60 and the best version of herself. You know, put a little dot on the calendar. Say, all right, I'm gonna do awesome for 3 days. I'm gonna do awesome for 10 days, whatever it may be.
Beautiful. Guys, thank you so much for joining us here at the Health Made Simple show.
And once again, thank you everyone for showing up. Keep doing the thing, keep sharing it out, keep spreading the love, and continue to take deliberate action for your mind, your body, overall wellness. Gotta be awesome.